You've been connected to the DedSecCast. Enjoy the show.
Hey guys, Brett here, connecting from UbiCentral, and welcome back to the DedSecCast. Today we have a very special episode because I'm joined by two amazing people. First up, we have Chase Strait, the community developer on Watch Dogs 2. Welcome back. How are you doing?
It's super good to be here once again, and I'm doing great.
That is great, and it's always great to have you on. And for this episode, we also have Jonathan Morin, the creative director on both Watch Dogs and Watch Dogs 2. How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. It's great to be part of this. It's been a while since I've been chatting about Watch Dogs 2 and Watch Dogs 1, so it's going to be fun.
I'm not going to lie, I'm kind of freaking out because I've just listened to you in interviews and stuff all the way back from 2013, and just to be able to talk to you right now is pretty insane. So just thank you for taking the time out of your day to come on.
You know, Brett, can I admit something as well? So
yes,
I wasn't I came on the franchise in the second installment, and before coming onto the title, I had only known John through E3 and some of the videos and stuff that they did for one. And when I finally got to meet him, I had a very similar reaction. I was like, holy shit, it's Jonathan Morin. This is awesome. I can't believe I'm in the same meeting room.
And like, before we get started, I do want to quickly mention that like this podcast / interview is like more centered around Jonathan. So I mean, like, Chase will jump in at times, but I just want to make it clear, like, I'm not ignoring you, Chase. I love you.
That was my main contribution to this podcast, was that admission.
All right, see you later.
Yes.
All right. So Jonathan, first off, I mentioned right at the start that you're the creative director on both the Watch Dogs games. So I was just wondering if you could kind of go in more detail and explain what a creative director actually does for those who may not know.
Well, in a broad stroke, the creative director is responsible for the vision of the game and what the game's going to be. But then afterwards, he works along other directors that are more specialized, like, for example, an animation director, a game director. And together, they continue to construct and define the vision together, and also how it's going to be executed. So I think the closest thing, if you look at two movies, would be like a movie director, that kind of stuff. But for all of the mechanics and different parts of the game. So what do we want to achieve and how are we going to achieve it? And then afterwards, it gets more specialized per game, depending on the situation.
And just like real quick, this question kind of ties into that. You know, when did you actually start working on Watch Dogs? Because I kind of looked into this before, and you were actually working on Far Cry 2, which, by the way, is a really good game. I feel like it's kind of underrated. But yeah, when did you actually know about Watch Dogs and then start working on it?
I started to work on Watch Dogs, if I'm really accurate, at the end of 2008. So we finished Far Cry 2. Actually, we were still debugging certain parts of Far Cry 2, and I was already starting to grab some of the people that were early going to join that team to start when we had no bug to fix, and going to grab coffee all day and try to chat about all sorts of weird stuff to see what we would like to do. And that were the first glimpse of what Watch Dogs became afterwards. So near Christmas 2008 was already a very, very premature beginning.
And did like someone come up to you and ask you to kind of be the creative director? Like, how did that end up working out?
It started, Dominic Guin was the producer on both Watch Dogs, and I've been working with that guy for a very long time, was the technical director on Far Cry 2. So it was, we were already together, he already knew me, so he approached me because he thought I would be a good fit for that, and then we continued those chats, and then afterwards it became more of a process. Like, you start by being a small team, there's no titles, you work with Ubisoft, and then you start having certain interesting interactions with everybody that is important at UB, and then they start slowly officializing these things. So it was kind of organic, having an idea of how to build a team and then making it happen progressively.
You mentioned that the idea kind of started around 2009, and so when you guys started thinking about it, did you kind of always plan to make it for the next gen consoles, or did it just kind of happen as you progressed in development?
That was more of a progressive we started more with what the hell do we want to do, And as we chat and together found a bit more the hooks we were interested in, time was passing by. We had meetings with the UB and we showed demos. And at a certain point in time, it was more Yves Guillemot's decisions, like at the business level, to think that we had the good potential to be on pushing the tech for what would happen to consoles and PCs. So we started in a high-end PC, which ended up explaining like the whole like E3 like of showing up on high-end PC, and we were pretty blunt saying it was happening there because we had no idea where console were going at that time. So it was an interesting experience to kind of blind shot what we thought would be technology and those kind of games in the future. Great opportunity and quite fun to do so, actually.
Speaking of the first game, I told people on Twitter that I would be interviewing you, and just so many people have been begging me to ask this. So here it goes. Was there like originally going to be character customization for online?
How it happens when you start like creating a game is you have all sorts of crazy ideas and you make a huge list of features, and that list grows every second. Like it becomes like ridiculous of how much stuff everybody would love to put in a game. Then it all comes down to what you're able to achieve versus the quality of the game. So of course we add customization on characters, but because we were going for a personal story on the main character, we decided that it was not the first priority back then, because it was more like a personal quest about a character. So design of that character, who he is, how he dress, it seemed like a reasonable fit to not over push on character customization compared to other features. It was more like that. It was not like we don't want to do it. It was more like to do it without breaking the character is a significant amount of work to do it properly. And if you do that, then you don't do something else. And since we had to build all of those technologies and simulation for the city, you don't have much competition when you start comparing stuff like character customization and having vehicle traffic or stuff that are so fundamental to what we're trying to achieve. So yeah, there were conversations about it, but even still today, I still feel it was the right call to make that priority, to then afterwards show up with Watch Dogs 2 and have a lot more like possibilities with it. And that's what's fun with these kind of games. When you continue to grow the simulation and you can continue to add stuff over time. And that's what makes it possible to make those huge monsters. It's over time. It doesn't happen magically.
I don't think people kind of realize that since you had an always online kind of thing, it would kind of be impossible, to have a different character, because, it's like you said, it's just kind of one story in one game where people can join your world. So to have, character customization for online would take you out of the experience, really.
Well, it would have been an extra challenge. There possibly could have been ways to do it, but nothing that would have been simple. And that's, I think, what comes down to it. When you start looking at everything you want to do and you start drawing lines in a mind map of all the repercussions of doing it well, sometimes the right call is to not do it at all, or else you end up with so many holes that then you're not able to wrap up and the game becomes terrible. So it's a never-ending story of being able to foreshadow execution and what's going to go right, what's going to go wrong versus what you want to put in the game.
What was, the biggest challenge that you face when you created the first game? Just was there any ideas that you really wanted to do, but just couldn't because of time and budget?
That's a very broad and interesting question. There was a lot of challenges in making the first Watch Dogs. I think if I had to pick one, it would be the seamless online that I think was the most challenging. Not because of the idea itself, but the fact that not only we had to build all those simulation in which players could control so many different things in the simulation, but on top of that, you could seamlessly have other players show up. It was a constant design nightmare to be able to consider what would happen if another player would show up there. Or the biggest.
Also on that too is since it was always online, there was, ways people eventually figured out that someone was in your game. So like, if you click the pause menu, the background would still be running and, things like that. So I would imagine it was really hard to do that.
It was hard to tweak all those things, but in the end, what you just described for me is a feature. It's not a problem. Like at it the way I do. The way I see it is I was seeing players obsessively looking at if there was someone in their shoulder, over their shoulder, and that's exactly what I wanted. So in the end, like trying to pop the map and exploit the system and go out of your way and your normal game flow just to verify if there was someone out there was kind of a proof of concept to me. So sometimes what people see as an exploit is actually an interesting way of wrapping up the design, to say we don't have this clear mechanic that defines paranoia, but that's paranoia. That's like overly looking at stuff, and not in a negative way, in a cool way. Like we had never played a game where you could feel that kind of feeling of looking over your shoulder, and if we felt that was people feeling this way in a game that talks about, you know, like looking at other people's shoulder and spying on people and look at their information, we felt was an interesting achievement with the limitation we've had in order to put the game in the box. That's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, like I've never actually thought about it like that. So, but you did, you know, eventually in the sequel kind of fix it with the pause screen and everything. And, you know, was focus mode kind of removed for that reason as well? Or was that just a gameplay element that you decided to get rid of?
Was not removed because only of that. There was surely a disjoint on the design point to say that we had a feature to do slow motion at the same time as we had seamless. And one of the things we didn't like in Watch Dogs 1 is it was not that elegant to have certain things you couldn't do. It was not necessarily because you could trick the system, which we didn't mind to an extent. It was more of like a matter of elegance. Like we had a button dedicated to something that wouldn't work in certain circumstances, and we felt that was not the right way to go. So that's the main reason why we started to consider what Watch Dogs 2 would be without the focus. The other aspect was also the character, and we started to forge Marcus and all of these guys. From DedSec, we felt that focus was more a skill that was transcend someone who's extremely good with guns, and as opposed to the DedSec guy who felt like would be more about hacking. So we started to put a lot more our energy into the game mechanics to make sure hacking would be a much more involved toys and assimilation and all the aspect of the games. So that's where the button went, because people not always realize that, but in the end, you have an economy of buttons on a controller. Each of them is extremely precious, and at some point you start lacking the amount of inputs to do everything you want to do, and you start trying to crisscross these to make it more understandable and make the right choices. And making a button about slowing down times only in certain moments felt like the wrong choice, even though we knew how much fun it was to do it in the first game.
The last question I have for the first game is kind of like a personal one. It's like Bad Blood was, you know, such an amazing expansion. So I was just wondering if you could go back and just make another DLC for the first game, you know, what would you want it to be about? Or did you ever have, you know, other DLCs that were planned, but again, just didn't have time or the budget to make it?
We surely had conversations about possibilities of DLCs once we were discussing the matter. I don't believe there was a second DLC ever officially planned for it, but that I couldn't be able to officialize that statement 1% in a long time. That being said, though, I would have loved to be able to do another one with Jordy.
I think everyone would kind of want that after
exactly. So it was a hard pick. Like we had to look at who's the most popular. They're both really, really popular. So we ended up picking T-Bone because there was a bit more possibilities in the narrative to make him involve rapidly. But Jordy would have been a very interesting fit. The thing is, I think what made us flinch with Jordy versus T-Bone was the fact that Jordy, in his essence, didn't necessarily transcend the concept of hacking. Hitman, so if we wanted to really bring another character, but also not, you know, completely remove all the cool stuff you could do in the game, and instead try to improve upon them with the little RC remove control card, all these things, it felt more natural to go with T-Bone, which was a hacker in the first place and could bring something to the table on that department. Other side of that, though, I would have loved to play with Jordy again. Like he's a really funny character and great guy to mess around with.
I mean, like I said, everyone kind of loves Bad Blood, and I think you did make the right choice going with T-Bone because he was kind of the, original hacker who started everything, and his relationship with Default was kind of like brushed on in the main story, but you guys definitely expanded it a lot more. So, yeah, I just think, like you said, it made more sense for T-Bone, but
I think so.
yeah, a lot of people did like Jordy.
Oh yeah, for sure, me included.
So now I want to kind of transition into Watch Dogs 2, and I originally asked David this last time, but I want to ask you this too, just to see if you have a different answer. But, when Watch Dogs 2 was becoming a thing, was there ever a version of Aiden being the main character still?
The only time we saw Aiden in Watch Dogs 2 was as a placeholder pawn, like at the beginning. Like when you start making prototypes, you use the data you have from the engine. So I'm pretty sure we ended up messing around with Aiden to try some stuff at the beginning, but that was only based like a temporary thing while we figure out our new character. We knew we wanted to change character because we knew we were in San Francisco. We started with picking the city. So for us to start making Aiden move around based on the end of the first game, it felt like too much of a stretch instead of embracing the culture of San Francisco. So we knew really early on that we wanted to switch vibe based on what we had swallowed in terms of information and vibe from California when we went there.
Going back to what you'd said at first, I do remember when all of the NPCs in the game in the early builds of Watch Dogs 2 were Aiden, and you were playing as Marcus, and you, like, at one point there's like a sample mission, and you went and beat up Aiden to get like a data thing or something, and it was so funny.
Yeah, I should release that if you still have that version. Just like a little video
I'm
of
not
it.
sure. It's probably a bug that was fixed very fast. It happened quite a few times actually. Like I don't know why, and it's something that I saw in other games too, in videos. Like in those kind of simulation games, sometimes you end up having this bug where everybody becomes a character. I'm pretty sure you saw that in other games, and we saw pretty funny stuff happening.
Up, right? Like if the build couldn't load the NPC, or if there was some like disconnection, it would default to Aiden being that person.
There's like when we went to go play it, like the inner circle back before the game actually released, there's what you guys have is God mode, which is you're just invincible, and it was just funny seeing that because Marcus would start dancing and you could just fly him across the map, and like I've never seen that before because I'm not a game developer, but just seeing that from an outside perspective was pretty funny.
It's funny. This comes from Assassin's Creed. I think so.
Conan O'Brien actually played like Assassin's Creed Origins, and when he was playing it, he accidentally entered God mode, and then like Bayek was just flapping his arms like a bird or something.
Exactly. So it's just animators ended up in the first. I think it happened in the first Assassin's Creed. Like they were. Like people, when they developed, we constantly go in fly mode to see what's going on elsewhere, to try and debug fast, and they were tired of seeing the pawn doing nothing. So I think either Prince of Persia or the first Assassin's Creed ended up putting an animation that it's completely ridiculous on it. And then everybody started doing that, and we're still doing it today. So we use animation. I saw sometimes animators spending their spare time to do a new animation to make people laugh in a meeting when they start triggering it for the first time. So it's simple, funny stuff to do.
Going back to Aiden real quick, as you know, there's a side mission where he's there, and then also Jordy's in the DLC, and Tobias was also brought back with T-Bone. So did you guys, kind of want to bring back all these characters as well as just, kind of references to the first game?
We tried to. We wanted to do Easter eggs in the first game and also like expand the universe, definitely. But we wanted to be careful also to not overdo it. Well, like we ended up like letting the writers like Ethan Petty and these guys like add strong feelings with some characters. They had ideas that they wanted to express through it, so we let them express themselves through it, and they ended up doing those links that we thought were interesting. So we wanted to have that links without making it start to feel like there was a party in California and everybody was there, because at some point we wanted to still make it feel like a different city. So it was a balance there, but I think they ended up doing a pretty good job.
Another popular question I got was, why did you guys make the decision not to bring back mini games or digital trips?
There was that was an interesting one. Like in the first game, something that I felt when I came back from vacation, which was
Yeah, I
an important
remember.
part of
Yeah,
finishing.
like right when you released the game, you tweeted out like, "So glad to be on vacation" or something.
That was a fun time, fun summer. I took the entire summer off. And when we came back, one of the first thing I ended up insisting on with the people, we all insisted on trying to make a game that was a bit more focused. We felt that making an open world game, you can end up like trying to put many different ideas, like I said, like a huge list of features, and you try to keep the best ones. The digital trips was a very fun idea. It was super popular, and I really liked doing them. And I think the guys in Paris who were doing it had a lot of fun executing them. But when we ended up doing Watch Dogs 2, we wanted to make sure we would try to articulate the vision and what the proposition was in a more precise way. So we felt that the digital trips was kind of a sidetrack. So in our conversation, we decided to try and focus more on stuff that would be about DedSec. It would have been also a bit harder to start messing around with the craziness of DedSec on one side and what they could end up doing in stories, and also the digital trip with Aiden. It was kind of simple. It was kind of in our head, you had a lot going on, and sometimes escapism could have been an interesting logical step. But in Watch Dogs 2, it felt more like a purpose where everybody they all have each other. They're not alone. Like they can mess around with their to have followers and stuff like that. So it felt like digital trips would have been kind of a side thing, and that was something I was trying to avoid. Try and make sure that everything in the game would support a core idea instead of being all over the place. But that doesn't take away anything,
right? Like each thing, whether it was a side mission or a main mission, everything's a story that you're doing.
Actually, it was always about DedSec and making sure that we reinforce how the world turns around this relationship that they have with what's going on. So we felt it was kind of out of place.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing that I think a lot of people really wanted to see was Cash Run, just because, the parkour was a lot better in the second game. So I just feel like more people kind of wanted to see that, whereas, digital trips were fun, but I feel like Cash Run just would have made a lot more sense for Watch Dogs 2.
But it's never a bad idea to end up adding these things in the game necessarily, but like I said earlier on, it's more a question of choice. We put a lot of effort in the second game to make sure simulation of NPCs were a lot more interesting to mess around with. Stuff with the hacking would be a lot more interconnected with the simulation. So these things, so we ended up putting all of our effort into that. So we didn't want to have to figure out kind of smaller games inside of that. Bring back like one, it's still work and translating that into new simulations. So that was mainly for it.
In retrospect, do you think the shift in tone was better for the second game? And like, if you were going to make a third game, not confirmed or anything, but if you were, would you want it to be kind of a mix of the first and second in tone, or would you kind of want to, continue where the second game went?
The way I see it, it's not really the tone for what Watch Dogs is. It's the tone of where you are. Like the first game, we were in Chicago. Chicago is a city that had a lot of crime, a lot of surveillance based on violence, but actually they're just fronts system that don't necessarily help this, like the situation back there. It's a very serious place where there's a lot of big deal stuff that happened in the past in their history.
And a lot of rain.
Exactly. So it was yeah, all the rain as well. So like it was a tone that was natural for what was going on there. When we arrived in San Francisco, there was no way that tone would happen. It was like this is not what San Francisco is all about at all. So like if we have to talk about hackers dealing with San Francisco, it cannot be the same tone. So like if there is like another game, like regardless of what it would be or who would be working on it, it would have to be based on where it is, because it becomes what it's about, the people who are in there, and then what's at stake, and then you can start defining the tone based on who those peoples are. Like younger hackers that feel that everything is possible and they're intelligent enough to make a statement inside of California, where open minds is what drives everything, is a completely different setting than the seriousness of the issues in Chicago, where there's a lot of crimes and issues and possibly a need for a vigilante. And wherever the next one is, if it happens, it would have to follow that trend. And I like to think that Watch Dogs can be the people drives the variety of what it could have to offer, instead of always saying that because it tags like Watch Dogs on it, it has to be like this recipe that is constantly redone. Watch Dogs is about people, and people are all different. So I think if you're true to that statement, it's totally fine to explore different tones, different age of main characters, and different aspect of life. And this way, Watch Dogs can relate to different people from the first to the second to whatever could come next in the future.
I've been thinking, a perfect city kind of for Watch Dogs. And I mean, I'm sure you guys have discussed multiple cities, every time you make a new game. But I really think New York could kind of make a perfect setting, just with the stock exchange. And then, it's kind of corrupt in a lot of ways and there's lots of cameras, but, just throwing that out there.
Thank you for your feedback, Brett. We have no further comment.
I think the fun part about the subject matters around surrounding Watch Dogs is pretty much every city in the world are going in that direction. So like there's a lot of possibilities if we ever explore these kinds of things. So it's New York is an interesting setting as much as many others are as well. So we'll see in the future what could happen.
For the second game, when you started development on it, did you kind of ever want it to be, like an RPG, or was there talks about it just being single player only or anything like that?
It didn't start really with that. It started with an idea, since it started at the bottom up with the hacking and stuff like that, we didn't start by saying, oh, we want a single player game only, stuff like that. We started with the idea we wanted to do an open world. That's definitely the case, and we wanted it to be different in the way you interact with it. As the game evolved, it rapidly became about connecting to everything and hacking everything. So as soon as that started to emerge, for me, it rapidly connected with connectivity. Happened really fast that we knew we wanted to have something to do with being watched or being able to eavesdrop into other people's game. It was not necessarily about PvP or stuff like that back then. It was just if we do a game that talks about the emergence of connectivity in our world, then we would be super dumb to not talk about online, because it's the perfect metaphor for online. So it was never, it has to be solo, it has to be a mix of both. It was more, what is the game about? And once you know what the game is about, then everything else starts to make sense very fast. So if it's about an hyper-connected society, well, have online in one form or the other, and it should be inspired by that thematic. It's more in that order that it ended up happening. We did knew from the beginning we wanted to have a solo campaign, though, and something that would push the story forward. So that we knew from the start.
And just talking about the universe, the first Watch Dogs had an ebook, but have you ever kind of wanted to expand more into different platforms, kind of like Assassin's Creed does with comics and, book series or a TV show?
Yeah, it happens. I believe we have 2 comics installments on Watch Dogs that happens in Rio, I think. There's that going on, that's already there. I think there was the ebook, like you said. I'm not aware of all the stuff, to be quite frank, that is being looked at. It's more Thomas Geoffroy that was looking at that. But there's already quite a few things that started to emerge, and I think UB is interested in these kind of things. So it's expanding the universe with other media is always a cool thing, as long as we're careful with how we're doing it and we don't end up making spy webs of stuff that makes no sense. So I think if we go at a natural pacing and we're careful with it, it's always an interesting opportunity.
Is the Watch Dogs movie still a thing, by the way?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Being honest here.
Okay.
What's a movie?
There was definitely announcements on that back during Watch Dogs ones, but I have no idea where that's about or where it's going. I'm not really involved in the movie at this point.
No worries. So, like, going to these last two questions, they're kind of more personal again. It's just like for you. And so, what was your favorite memory working on Watch Dogs 1 or 2? Like, is there any standout moments for you?
Has to be the E3 2012 stage moment.
Were you like really nervous?
Was like, oh yeah, I was super nervous, but for me that moment made no sense whatsoever. Like it was like we were unannounced, nobody knew me existed. Surprises at E3 for years, so in a funny way. I'm not sure I never said that to anyone. Like when we took the plane to go to E3 212, Dom and I had a message for the team. Said to them, don't expect any coverage, and probably nobody will write about us because we never told anybody we're going. So we said we're going there to make a test and do stuff, but it's fairly possible that nobody will care.
And yeah,
Really?
obviously that didn't happen.
But that was a very honest, like warning to the team saying, we think we have something very special. It's going to be very cool. But since nobody know who we are, it's possible nobody cover us because they are so busy covering the other stuff. We were extremely wrong. Super fun to show that to the people and see the response. It was the interest and the intrigue that it created. And when you make a game, more rewarding than feeling like what you create as a team creates intrigue.
Like, so I was gonna say too, when you came back from E3, was the whole team, like way more excited now to kind of work on the project?
Yeah,
since,
for sure.
Yeah.
Like it's always the case, before, like I remember that before going to E3 212, the most popular question of someone coming to my desk was, John, what the hell is that thing, profiler? Nobody gives a shit about writing. Like nobody reads stuff. Like that's not a mechanic. A lot of people were saying like didn't get the idea, saying nobody's gonna read these things, nobody's gonna care. And then when you come back from E3 212, nobody comes to your desk with those comments anymore. Like they start focusing on. So there's always everybody, like me, the entire team, everybody at some point needs the response from the people. And me personally, I enjoy people ask, like they have question, like the question triggers in their minds, and they start wondering. And it's slightly different and unique. That means that it strikes a chord that has not been struck before, and that's exciting. And that was the biggest motivations for the team to continue to push forward and continue to satisfy these needs. And it's not about answering all those questions. It's about continuing to feed that intrigue so that people can want to be in that world and discover it for themselves. That was a pretty cool, pretty great moment to see that happen.
When you went to like announce Watch Dogs 2, I mean, it was a bit of a different process that time, because I feel like you guys announced it kind of in March or April, like you kind of did like a reveal trailer and then you went to E3. So, was E3 still as good though the second time, or just kind of different in a way?
It's a different thing. Like you cannot replicate Watch Dogs 1 with Watch Dogs 2. It's impossible in terms of a feeling, because Watch Dogs 1 was a secret. It was something that was clearly pushing the limits of where we could do tomorrow. That was a very different type of feel than Watch Dogs 2. Watch Dogs 2 was, at one time, it was less stressful. As we knew everything. We knew we were on what. We knew it was running on what. We knew like all of these things were clear. The first game, we didn't know how the machine would be built. We had no idea how they looked. And like aside from the high-end PC, nothing else existed in information. So for me, there was a lot less stress in there. But the exhilaration of having a surprise was different too. So it was two different, very fun experience. For me, the best one was still E3 212, because it was kind of the first time as a creative director I was showing anything. And the fact it was such a strong response will remain printed in my brain for a very long time. Not just for me, but for the team that was watching, which I think was even more important to me.
This is going to be hard, but I'm going to ask it. So, who is your favorite character in Watch Dogs 1 or 2?
My favorite character is Josh.
See, I said that too. Like, well, he's my favorite of Watch Dogs 2. Overall, it's T-Bone, but Josh is really high up there. And I mean, I feel like a lot of people just don't kind of understand why. I feel like he's underrated in a lot of ways.
It's a personal thing for me. Like one of my child is autistic, and that's a high reason why Josh explores that concept. But it's also the writers and Patrick Plod who worked on the narrative a lot in Watch Dogs 2, who pushed that idea and embraced it. And I think for me it was to have people respond with questions to the first Watch Dogs. If I had to pick a moment that was great, Dogs 2 would be the letters the team received all over the world talking about thanking us about making an autistic character. For a parent who had an autistic child, unbelievable.
And David, I feel like, tweeted one of them out, right, Chase?
Right.
Yeah, this is the one. We got several.
One's from parents. We had one from the people who are autistic directly, and for me that was great. Like it was unprecedented for me in my career. So I think that's really, really cool that people can respond this way. And I think Josh is my favorite one because I feel the writers did a great job. Nobody had to overlook their shoulders on their execution of it. They just did a great job. The acting is awesome. The feeling of it is respectful. It can make you laugh. It can make you feel like they can be strong. So I do all of these things in a really great way, and that was pretty awesome. So that's why he's my favorite character.
Speaking of Josh, I know I said that was the last question, but we're talking about Josh now, so I have to ask. Like, was there? I feel like there was a rumor or something going around that he was kind of a different character before release. Like, wasn't he supposed to be a YouTube vlogger or something like that? Was that Josh, or was that a different character?
No, it was what Josh became, but at the original cast, there was kind of a young YouTuber character, and like in the way he was talking and everything, it was just too much. I don't think it was a good rendition of YouTubers, to be fair, and we just started a conversation. Because some people, I think it's Pat Plod actually, who came to my desk saying, we don't feel that guy, like he doesn't fit with the other characters. We had to change him, and I just sparked, like if there's one profile we didn't touch is like we could have one of them being autistic and in a real way and be super smart and bring something to the table that the others don't have, and at the same time it would tap into something different. And I started to talk about my kid a bit, and then he left with that, and it just happened. They did an amazing job, and they grabbed that idea and they made it their own, and they made a great jobs with it. So it was not that we had to replace him. It's often what happens. We knew we had a certain cast and a certain number of characters wanted to have to make sure they had enough screen time and stuff like that. One was not fitting the mix, but we knew we had to replace him. And then, I mean, I couldn't be more happy that we replaced him because he's my favorite character now.
Well, thank you guys both for coming on. If you ever do decide to bring a YouTuber in the game, right here. No, I'm just kidding. No, seriously.
We'll think about it.
Okay, thank you. That means a lot. All right, but yeah, thank you guys again for both coming on. I know you're busy. Chase, I wish I had questions for you. I'm sorry.
I'm sure you'll have questions at some point, and I'm always here for you.
I'm always here for you too, Chase. And Jonathan, thank you again. I know you're Jonathan, I know you're really busy, so I appreciate you coming on and answering these questions for me and for the community as well. Like
I said, it's fun to get your brain back at something like that, just like change the pace, and that was a pretty fun time. So anytime, no problem.